Good morning and welcome to the Real Logic Show. I'm your host Charlie, and here we deep dive into all things movies, from the biggest of blockbusters to the hidden gems, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and why. So grab your coffee and let's talk movies. It's been over a decade since Tron Legacy and Disney finally returned to the grid, but was it worth the wait? Today's video, we'll be having a full analysis on Tron Ares. So I feel like the first and most important topic I want to get into today is the visuals of this film. Tron Ares is one of the most stunningly looking movies that I've ever seen. What may not work for some people is that this is a movie that takes place in the real world. So having effects from the grid come into the real world, it may look a little wonky to some, but I thought the action sequences and just how it all came together was very stunning. One scene that really sticks out to me is when they're on the light cycles and you see that red strobe light following behind it. It just really is very jaw-dropping. And the entire Tron franchise itself has kind of been a benchmark for CGI since the beginning. If we go all the way back to Tron in 1982, that movie was actually up for nomination for Best Visual Effects, but just due to the time period in 1982, CGI really wasn't a thing back then. I mean, it was, but it wasn't used the way it was in the movie Tron, and it actually wasn't allowed to compete for the nomination for that specific reason. Then you go all the way to 2010 with Tron Legacy, and you had Tron Legacy, Transformers, and Avatar at that time that were really pulling the game forward with animation and CGI. And now you look at where we're at today, and most things are revolving around CGI. So it really just shows you the importance that Tron has had on the movie industry. One thing we can't fail to mention is the score of this movie. Having Nine Inch Nails do the soundtrack was one of the best decisions they ever could have came up with. It was no easy feat though, having to go up against Tron Legacy and Daft Punk soundtrack, which was absolutely phenomenal. This movie holds up. We can't fail to mention the difference in tone between Tron Ares and Tron Legacy. Tron Legacy, we had this father-son dynamic, this awe-driven, emotional, coming-of-age story that followed Sam Flynn, who was a human at the end of the day with human characteristics and human emotions. Whereas in Tron Ares, we followed Jared Leto's character, Ares, who is a program, and he's very stoic and doesn't have much emotion to him at all. It's a more gritty, I don't want to necessarily say dark, but a very real film. And I think you could still find an appreciation for Tron Ares after watching Tron Legacy, but you have to realize that they are two completely different films. And we're going to touch more into that in just a little bit. But one thing I will say is that fans of the original Tron movie, there is a sweet spot for them that they will gain an appreciation for this film, because there's a lot of callbacks to the original film, which I quite enjoyed. This is a better time than ever to discuss the pros and cons of this movie. As I mentioned in the past, the two greatest things about this movie are the visuals and the score of this film. And quite frankly, I was entertained the entire time watching this. I think the action is detrimentally better than what we were given in Tron Legacy, which I feel like was one of its weaknesses, is that had a little too less action, whereas I feel like in Tron Ares, maybe we have a little too much action, and it doesn't necessarily focus on the story as much. Not that a story isn't prevalent or there is a story. I just had some creative differences in how the writing process should have gone and how it ended up playing out, which wasn't necessarily the best. Now I have to stop for a moment and back up Jared Leto here. Jared Leto gets a lot of hate for the movies he's in, and some of the times it is his fault, but a good majority of the time it's not his fault. He just so happens to be in franchises that are on their tail end and heading out, and frankly doesn't have the best writing, and this movie kind of follows suit in terms of the writing process of it all. But I will say Jared Leto's acting and just the dialogue throughout the film was quite good. And I know he's the main character of the story, but he was a Morbius too, and look at how that movie turned out. But anyways, I will say with him being very stoic and not having much emotion to him, there were a lot of one-liners or or that dry humor throughout the film that I quite appreciated from him. Before we get into the verdict of the show, I have one more pro and con for you. For the pro, I feel like its connection to reality is very prevalent and more important than ever. We live in a time now where my entire TikTok For You page algorithm is loaded with AI videos where you have to kind of sit back and wonder, is this video I'm watching real or is this AI? And who knows what the future 5 years, 10 years, 20 years could look like. And I think this film does a really good job in that aspect. And in a way, it doesn't make you fear the future. Granted, there are a lot of cons that do happen in this movie that I don't want to get too spoilerly into. But I just feel like it's very realistic in terms of what could happen. Now, for my con, I feel like the world building very much so lacks. As I mentioned before, this movie takes place in the real world. And I think one of the best aspects of Tron Legacy was the world building of the grid. And we get to see more of the grid that was previously shown to us in the original Tron movie, and it was just built upon. And granted, there are still some grid scenes, but predominantly this movie takes place into the real world, and I think that really lacks for this film. Now on to the last segment of our show. It's called Watch It or Wait For It. And being the first movie review, it's kind of a shame that I can't give a straightforward answer to that. So let's break it down real quick. I feel like you really should go back and watch the first original Tron movie before going into seeing this movie. A lot of fans out there, and no blame to them, have only seen Tron Legacy. The original Tron is very dated, and it doesn't necessarily hold up the same. Being a fan, though, I really appreciated the original Tron, and with the amount of callbacks to the original, I think it's very important to see that one before going in to see this movie. Because even though honestly, there's not much tie-ins to Tron Legacy. There's a couple callbacks here and there, but ultimately, this is a sequel to the original Tron. Very separate story from Tron Legacy. And just a little side note rant I could go on real quick. This box office isn't doing very well, and being a fan of Tron, I want this movie to do well and continue on. And realistically, we're not going to be getting a Tron movie for the next 5 to 10 years. And honestly, they probably shouldn't have made this one either, because as much as I like Tron Legacy didn't do good in the box office either. So we're left in this kind of pickle of what the future holds for Tron. And I will say it set up some things for what the future could look like. But ultimately, I wouldn't get your hopes up as a fan. And that about wraps up our show. If you've seen it, let me know if you think Tron Ares deserved its reboot or if Disney should have left the grid dark. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.